very pleased to say we are joined by Stephen Curtis. He is a man who has spent much of his professional life in the energy space, notably as a leader of what is known as the NEST teams. These are people who respond to crises involving nuclear and radiation sorts of problems uh, to, you know, basically protect our people against such eventualities. He is also an advocate for a new kind of nuclear reactor technology. Some of it's really not all that new, but it's newly being discussed as something we need to integrate into our electric grid and electric generation capabilities more generally, including those of the United States military. Steve Curtis, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Securing America, sir.
Thank you, Frank. Great to be here.
Let me just thank you right out of the box for your service to our country over many years, and that you're providing to our Secure the Grid coalition, a really important effort of our Center for Security Policy that I think has been elevating, with the help of highly skilled people like yourself, the really vital need to enhance the resiliency of our electric grid against all hazards, including things like electromagnetic pulse. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. But before we do, let's level set here on the need, as you see it, for a new approach to nuclear power in our country, looking at considerations like baseload and drought, and as I say, this resiliency issue.
Well, first of all, I'll say that the light water reactors we've used for 6 decades have shown themselves to be have the best industrial safety record among all energy producing uh, companies. So we really have an inordinate fear of what these are. These are actually the safest and best way to go. Next generation reactors, we call them, or generation four reactors, or as you put it, small modular reactors, are really offer us a wide variety of advantage over the light water reactors. Light water reactors you have to put next to some big source of water. Small modular reactors can go anywhere. They'll be installed underground, so they'll be more resistant to any kind of danger, external danger, including EMP. As we move down, we'd rather go to microgrids, and that's another story. But if you can bury your electrical delivery system, you're in a much more protected posture for that reason as well. But when you look at nuclear power, I'll just tell you the when you split an atom, you get 50 million times more energy than you get when you burn a molecule of coal. Now that's an advantage that's hard to ignore, and there've been naysayers about it, but most of those technically don't hold merit, and we
Yeah.
can go into detail you want on that.
Yeah,
But
let me ask you about some of the detail here. That obviously also, to be, realistic about it, has to factor in the costs of splitting that atom versus the costs of bringing that molecule to bear. And in part, those costs have been greatly exacerbated, as you know, by some of those inordinate fears, as you call them, and some of the regulatory oversight that has been brought to bear in part as a result of those fears by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Um, when you look at things like the need for base load power to be supplied when it can't be by these so-called green technologies, solar and wind specifically, um, the costs, it would seem, and the speed with which these kinds of technologies are brought to bear would seem to be, things that we could address rather directly and make much more efficient use, yes, but also more rapid use of these so-called small modular reactors. No.
absolutely, the real thing that holds back nuclear right now, ironically, is subsidies to wind and solar.
Hmm.
It just it's almost like they get free power from wind and solar, and it doesn't matter what else they do. They can make money off it no matter what they do. That digs into our pockets as taxpayers. I don't think people realize the amount that it digs into our pockets as taxpayers. There used to be cheap natural gas that was a big competitor, but now natural gas is not so cheap anymore. So it focuses on the regulation. And the regulation is very oppressive. Being the safest way to produce power, it's the most regulated aspect of that. NewScale, like we talked about before, has got an approval design for their light water reactor, and just for a reference, took them 7 years and $500 million to get their license. It doesn't take any time at all to get an approval for environmental impact statements or whatever they need for wind and solar. So it's a great dichotomy, and we start marching down this road to a monopoly on a certain business sector in America. We're really asking for trouble, because then
Yeah.
that takes out the competitive and innovative nature of what we do in America.
Right. So you've mentioned that NewScale, I guess, has got a light water reactor design, but also a small nuclear one. Is that right? Or are they two
It's a
different?
small modular reactor that really the water is contained. So you don't need to big buy
It is.
a large water source for this.
Okay.
It's
All
just
right. So
usually for water.
it is a
There's air
distinct.
cooling, there's molten salt, there's other ways to cool it and transfer the heat. They
Right.
chose the water design for their initial design.
Got it. But that has been approved by the NRC, the Nuclear
Yes.
Regulatory
But they're
Commission.
mostly
Uh,
marketing it overseas. So there we go again.
Let me ask you, yeah, let me ask you about another option that I understand the U.S. military has been pursuing. In fact, several different designs. But what are the advantages of their approach as you see it, and how does that fit into this regulatory problem?
Now, we started talking to the military about 8 years ago in Nevada, and their approach is to have what we call a microgrid, what they call islanding of power. So they can put a base on a small modular reactor, which is very small, megawatt or 1 to 5 megawatts, depending on the size. That way they can be independent of the national grid no matter what happens. And so they've really been moving on that now for the last 7 or 8 years, called Project Pele. They've down selected to two companies now, and they're selecting a base to put the original prototype on.
Steve, this is a very exciting development. I want to come back to get a little bit more
Mhm.
detail on how this works with the NRC on the other side of a very short break. We'll be
Sure.
right back with Stephen Curtis, a duty expert on nuclear power, a champion of bringing it to bear for all of our interests. And we'll talk with him about the military option right after this.